What is up, everyone? My name will be Josh, and today we're going to be talking about how to actually deal with anxiety without going to substances, without drinking, without smoking. So this is something that I personally suffer from. I am on a medication for anxiety. So this is not discounting anyone that does actually need to be placed on medication for anxiety. If you are going to do so, I usually suggest not getting on a narcotic, as there's the whole potential for another addiction or some kind of addiction to develop while taking it. So this is just going to be some natural ways to actually deal with your anxiety. These are all things that I try to implement and try to use pretty consistently, so I felt like some of you would actually get some use from it as well. So the first one we're going to start with is a pretty simple one that I feel like a lot of people overlook, and even people without anxiety, this is a really good thing to actually try to work into your life, and that's meditation. So there's a lot of different ways you can actually meditate. Once you learn how to do it, it's pretty easy to do by yourself. I know a lot of people are kind of like really scared to actually get into the practice, or just simply don't know how to get into the practice. So for that, I definitely suggest guided meditations to start. Body scans are specifically a really good one that I use pretty consistently, just because it kind of taught me how to meditate. It teaches you how to breathe better, and it's just a really solid tool to get you out of your head. So one of the really good intros to meditation is just downloading an app on your phone and trying it that way. Three of the biggest ones that I currently know about and currently use are Calm, Headspace, and Relax Melodies. And I know some of those are like paid. You do actually have to like pay for some of the specific individual sessions. Some of them are monthly, some of them are yearly subscriptions. So I know there is some free ones on a couple of those apps. I know Relax Melodies has some free ones, and I think Calm also does have some free ones. And then I do believe Headspace is actually, you have to pay for it to actually use their app. That being said, just learning the ideas of meditation is something you can basically at any time, any day implement. So meditation is a really good one to just get you the fuck out of your head and get you into a different plane of thoughts. That leads directly into yoga. Yoga's one that I've been implementing even while I was still actively using, still in addiction. And I've found it to be really good not only to build muscle and make your body look better, but also just get your mind out of whatever you're dwelling on, whatever you're anxious about. I feel like a lot of my personal anxiety falls into either future tripping or past tripping, and just like thinking about things I've done or thinking about possibilities and situations that could arise in the future. And when you're doing yoga, there's not really time for that. Like, you're focusing on your body, you're feeling your muscle groups being worked, and it's just a really, really helpful tool. So yet again, same issue as meditation. I feel like a lot of people are just overwhelmed by the idea of yoga. You see all these people on Instagram, or like actual professional yoga artists, I think is what they're called. Yoga instructors. I like yoga artists more. But yoga instructors doing these crazy ass poses, and that's not stuff that you have to or are probably even going to be able to do when you start doing yoga. It's going to take your body some time to like learn the poses and even be able to stretch to the point that a lot of these like professional yoga artists are able to. So just start with some beginners yoga. There's all kinds of classes on YouTube. The two channels that I personally use are Yoga with Adrian, which I'm pretty sure is like one of the biggest yoga channels on YouTube, and Boho Beautiful. But if you just type in yoga for beginners, or if you have like a specific thing like knee pain, back pain, you can even type in like yoga for back pain, and you'll immediately be able to find a practice that you can jump right into. I definitely suggest getting a yoga mat for stuff like this, but it's really not a necessity. And then there is also like yoga classes that you can get into, but that's usually a little bit more advanced. There is some beginner classes you can find, but I personally suggest before you actually like pull the trigger on going to a class, do some like YouTube in-house, in living room yoga in your own house or in your own room, and get comfortable with actually the practice before you pull the trigger and go into an actual class. The next thing I'm going to get into is something that I use yet again every single day, and that's tea. So there's a bunch of different herbal teas you can use. I suggest doing caffeine-free teas, just because caffeine tends to usually amp you up, and for me personally makes my anxiety significantly worse. So herbal teas, chamomile's one that a lot of people use. Just don't have anything planned after, as if you drink chamomile, you're probably going to get sleepy. It's more than likely going to make you tired. That does lead into my next one though, actually two of my next ones. Naps are a really good one. Naps, or just falling asleep if it's later at night, just shutting everything down, taking a break in the middle of your day. If it is a nap, it's really good to just restart your day on a good foot. I always find that sometimes if I don't implement a couple of these other techniques with a nap, I do just end up laying in bed and having shit swirl in my mind over and over for hours. But if you implement some of these other things before you actually go to take a nap, meditate, do some yoga, anything really, it usually is going to get you out of your head enough to be able to fall asleep. And once you wake up from the nap, you might be groggy, but then you'll be more focused on being groggy and not in that constant, terrible, anxious headspace. So that's a really helpful one. And then kind of looping back around to the teas and the whole non-caffeine thing, I just suggest trying to cut down your doses of caffeine. A lot of us are super reliant on caffeine to actually get through our days, so we'll drink like 4, 5, 6 cups of coffee in a day, or several energy drinks, and that's just something that is naturally going to amp you up, naturally going to stress you out, and naturally going to make you more anxious. So try to avoid caffeine if you can. If not, cut it out entirely if you're an inherently anxious person every day. Cutting your caffeine dose entirely will be super helpful. And usually it's better to be slightly tired or slightly groggy than an anxious mess. So kind of on that same note yet again, we're going to kind of move into the diet section of things. Diet is a very big part of the headspace you occupy. So I suggest like entirely changing your diet if you are constantly anxious, as there's probably something that's just not really naturally mixing with your body. And if we're kind of over encompassing diet as a whole, usually the rule of thumb is high protein, low carb, and try to avoid a lot of processed foods as well. So that's like, 80% of our American diet is carbs and processed foods. If you're not from America, you still probably eat a lot of carbs. It's in a lot of everything. So the rule of thumb generally, I believe, is 40% protein, 40% fat, and 20% carbs. And that's usually not what most people follow. A lot of people are like 80% carbs, 10% fat, 10% protein. So try to incorporate some actual fish, get some of those omega-3s, which are yet again a really healthy brain supplement. And it's just going to kind of rewire your brain getting on that healthier foot. Also, when it comes to anxiety, try to entirely avoid sugars, especially processed sugars, because sugar is a drug, no matter how much we don't like to accept that fact. What sugar kind of does is gives us these really high peaks and then really low valleys. And what that means is when we actually eat sugar, it's going to amp us up naturally, it's going to give us some energizing effects, and we're going to start to feel that peak. But unfortunately, on the other end of that, we're going to crash eventually, and we're going to basically start to get to that crave point where we just want more sugar. And if we don't feed our bodies with more sugar, you're usually going to get some kind of anxiety, some kind of stress, and you're going to get a cortisol release, which is the stress hormone. So you don't want cortisol. You want to try to lower those cortisol levels in any way, shape, or form. That also leads me into my next thing, which is video games. I know a lot of people, including Joe Rogan, think it's not great to play an excess of video games, and he has a point there. It's easy to get like addicted to video games and play for 16 hours straight, but if you are constantly kind of supplementing your day with video games, it's really good to just have some fun, get happy, play with some friends. That's going to naturally lower your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, as I just said, and it's just going to put you in a better headspace. Also, just having fun is probably going to boost your endorphins a little bit, so that's a natural happy chemical in our brains that will hopefully kind of reduce our anxiety and stress a little bit. So while you're playing those video games, one thing you're hopefully going to be doing is staying off social media. That's something I personally kind of, especially in this day and time with the shit show of the world that is 2020, I've been trying to implement more. I know it's my job to sit on YouTube and talk to a camera and to, interact with you guys on social media and stuff, but I've just been trying to stay the fuck away from social media as much as I can. I feel like there's almost not been a single time this year that I've hopped on social media and got some kind of anxiety. There is constantly shit that's going to be drawn up and brought to your eye that's going to make you stress the fuck out. So unless your social media is somehow a haven of like a safe place where there's like nothing but positivity, so basically you're only following like specific comedians and like astrology people, it's probably a semi-toxic place. So spending more time off of social media is a big one in this day and age, is something I've found. And with that time, you can actually get your ass outside, go hiking, go swimming. There's even just simple walks, runs, stuff like that Working out and getting outside are two things that are huge for me. They're things that for the last few years I really haven't been implementing much, as can be seen. But I'm slowly day by day trying to actually get, lifting weights or even just getting out on a walk and getting it into nature, going outside and absorbing some of that sun. I know I'm pasty, and as soon as I get the fuck outside, I turn into like a ripe tomato, but even small amounts of sunlight will boost your vitamin levels and make you feel significantly better. It's also a really nice thing to be able to get outside and just appreciate nature for what it is. It's sometimes the really simple things like looking at trees, looking at flowers, and just like genuinely appreciating the beauty around you. I know for me personally, when I was high, I was able to do that, but it's way fucking better when I'm sober. I can just go outside, start to appreciate the world for what it is, and you find like these little synchronicities and these little things that really make you appreciate nature. Even if it's just like watching a bird. Like for the last few weeks, every time I've gone out to do reading in the morning, which is another thing I'd suggest you guys to do, just read more, read things you're interested in, because that naturally takes your mind off of shit. But every time I go out and do my morning reading, there's this really fucking beautiful Stellar's jay, which is kind of like a blue jay. It's just in the jay family of birds. It comes out every morning and like hangs out with me. I say that in a very loose term. It's not like it comes and like sits on the table and fucking pours me up a cup of tea. It's just usually somewhere in the trees around. It sometimes lands on the railing close to me. But I've noticed it pretty consistently, and that's one of those things that makes me happy. It makes me significantly happier, no matter what I'm thinking about. It's appreciating those super small little things that happen on a daily basis. I also really suggest people actually take time to thought journal. So there's a couple different things you can do. It's gratitude lists are a really good place to start, especially if you're anxious or bordering that anxiety attack. Sit down with a piece of paper and just start writing things that you appreciate. Write a gratitude list out because it will kind of take your mind off whatever you're freaking out on and will start neurally rewiring your brain to appreciate the things you're writing down. Even if it's super simple things like you have a roof over your head or you're alive today. Write down a list of the things that make you happy and the things that you appreciate, and that will kind of turn itself into a gratitude list. And that really kind of changes your perspective from that anxious thinking to more of like happy thinking, because you start thinking about the things that usually if you're having like an anxiety attack or if you're super anxious, you're not taking the time to be like, I appreciate this and this and this. But once you actually have a gratitude list written down, even if you only do that once, then that kind of takes you out of that anxiety. You can refer back to that, continue to add to that, and those will be things that eventually you remember and you can start bringing up when you do start getting anxious. We always, no matter our situations, have things to be grateful for. And it's really hard in shitty, anxious, stressful, any bad thinking times to entirely forget about that shit and just dwell on the negative. So gratitude lists are awesome. Another really big one is anxiety journals or stress journals. And what that really is just when you're having an anxious day or a stressful day, write down the situation that caused it, if you can find that out. And if not, it's going to get you out of your head and get you to start thinking about what actually caused that state you're in. Write down what actually helps it, because in the future you'll be able to refer back to your anxiety journal or your stress journal and be like, oh shit, I gotta kind of keep myself out of that situation because that situation caused this. And once you've basically figured out the root cause or whatever actually caused it, just write down, journal really quickly what you can do to potentially avoid that and avoid yourself being back in that situation. It's a super easy thing to do that most of us don't think about and is super helpful to help us figure out how to manage this without substances. And another big one that kind of goes back into the meditation thing is figuring out how to actually control your breath. So there's all kinds of different methods for breathing. There's combat breathing, which is basically square breathing. That's 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold, and just repeat that cycle over and over again. And then the other big one I know about is 4-7-8 breathing. So that's 4 seconds in, hold it for 7 seconds, and 8 seconds out. And that kind of helps you just deeply breathe and get out of your head a little bit. Sometimes you will still have those thoughts continually swirl, but one of the things that stuff like that does is makes you think more about your breathing than your brain, basically. Because breathing is such a necessary thing that you have to obviously breathe. And controlling your breath will kind of take control back over of your brain, especially when it's twirling out of control. So those are techniques that, like I said, even combat veterans, soldiers, and stuff like that use, and will really get you the fuck out of your head. Some really simple things you can do are just take a fucking bath or get a massage. I guess a massage isn't very simple, as usually that costs a shit ton of money, but most of the time we have showers or baths, and I'm not saying just get in the shower and fucking put your hand against the shower and think about your entire life, because that's more than likely going to make everything significantly worse and will probably look like a movie moment. But if you are actually just like taking some time, taking a shower, listening to some good music, and trying to get out of your head instead of continually whirling that issue over and over in your head, it's something that will kind of calm your muscles, calm your body down, and will help you get to a more calm state. I do find showers don't always work for me. Usually baths work a lot better. And if you have a hot tub, get the fuck in the hot tub or a sauna, but those aren't things that most people have access to. I don't know how I forgot about this one way earlier in the video, but hydration is really important, as when you're dehydrated, it's really easy for your brain to get more mentally fatigued, which causes stress. So that's a super simple one that basically all of us can do, hopefully, which is just drink some more water. Make sure you're actually hydrated, because that's going to help you kind of control your brain. Two other ones we can implement all the time that are free, all of us can do it, are acceptance and action. Action is obviously just taking action, trying to control what you can control. And then acceptance is kind of the same thing, just like accepting the things that you can't change. There's a lot of shit we can't change. We can't change everything about our lives, and acceptance kind of takes some of that future tripping away, which helps us kind of accept the place we're in instead of worrying about everything that could possibly happen to us. So I promise that I'm totally not trying to be a Facebook mom on this one. There is some essential oils out there that can actually help you, and I'm not trying to sell you anything, but this video is sponsored by I'm just kidding. There's a lot of actual essential oils we can use that make us feel less stressed or less anxious. Lavender, rose, vetiver, ylang ylang, chamomile are just a few of the many. I believe bergamont's on there, frankincense as well. There's a large list of essential oils that, if you do some research into, actually do help with calming stress and anxiety. So I definitely suggest finding some way to incorporate essential oils into your life. If it's getting one of those diffusers and just putting it into, some water for you to actually diffuse into your room, or if it's just like rubbing some essential oils on you. You can also get tinctures of a lot of these essential oils, and there's even a lot of health supplements that are actually super, super helpful. I think this is one probably a lot of people are gonna like. Dark chocolate is a really good thing to eat in smaller doses. Don't just be going out there eating pounds of dark chocolate a day being like, I'm anxious, let me be. If you want to, go for it. But dark chocolate is something that will significantly reduce levels of stress and anxiety. I kind of mentioned this earlier, I think. Fish oil or omega-3 is another really good supplement you can use to more prevent anxiety. So these ones aren't so much like in the moment when you're having an anxious day or when you're having an anxiety attack. These aren't things that you can really use immediately all the time. Dark chocolate, I'm sure, is. But a lot of these things are more like preventative to try to prevent anxiety. And that does fall into some of the other things I talked about, like foods, diet, and stuff like that. A lot of the times, immediately changing your diet is not going to cause less anxiety, but over time, you will find yourself significantly less anxious. The other ones that I'm thinking of are kava kava. Kava is like a root that a lot of people, it's actually not a root, it's a spice. They call it like the intoxicating spice or something like that in the Pacific Islands. And you actually can take too much kava, so be careful about that. And then the other one, I'm entirely spacing. Oh, ashwagandha is another actual supplement that can kind of help you a little bit with that. The last thing I do have to actually push and stress, because I think people with anxiety, this is kind of a huge necessity, is some form of therapy. I know therapy is fucking expensive. It's really expensive to actually sit down weekly with a therapist and diagnose your root issues of anxiety. But it's something I do suggest, especially with a lot of these online resources becoming available to us. You can usually find a pretty decent therapist for like $20 or $30 a session. sometimes, kind of depending on where you are across the country. But there's also things like CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and RET, which is rational emotive therapy, that can actually kind of, in the specific moment, help you get out of situations. So both of those things are things I'll let you kind of do some research on into on your own. I have a little bit of experience with CBT, a lot more with RET, which is rational emotive therapy, and that's just kind of like diagnosing the root issue of what's going on, running some of your unsafe beliefs through that, and then reforming your belief or reforming your action, so you're not just going from thought to action. And a lot of the times that's super helpful because we don't express a lot of the negative emotions that can have negative effects on the people around us. So if you're like in a relationship and your anxiety is like hurting your partner in some way, you're struggling to emotionally connect, learning RET is a really big one, because you're not going to have those explosive anxious reactions that a lot of us have, where we're basically just reacting on pure emotion. It makes you run some of your unsafe beliefs and kind of reform actual safer beliefs before you have your emotional reaction. So I think that basically finishes our full list of shit that I use or shit that I found helpful. I did a little bit of research for this video, but a lot of these were honestly just kind of things that I personally have learned or things that I personally implement to control my anxiety. This doesn't mean that I don't still experience anxiety. I feel like if you're an anxious person, and even if you're not an anxious person, you probably are constantly going to feel some level of anxiety. It's just kind of a part of the natural human experience. That being said, we don't have to let it rule our lives. We don't have to have negative reactions to the people around us, and we can actually find ways to control that and usually significantly help us. So I know this was a little bit of a ramble, a little bit of a rant, but I definitely hope you guys got something good out of this. I feel like there's some helpful techniques that hopefully everyone can implement in this. And I think I'm going to wrap this up with that. So thank you guys very much for watching. I definitely hope all of you are having yourself a wonderful day. If you're having a shitty day, keep pushing forward. It always gets better if we work for it. So it's a simple positive message today, but it's an important one. I love you guys all, and stay positive, stay medicated.